I opened my eyes in silk sheets that weren't mine, next to a man who was getting married in 12 hours, but not to me. What started as revenge became the biggest mistake of my life, and by sunset, everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and karma would be shattered forever. Before we dive into this story that will leave you questioning everything, hit that like button if you're ready for a tale of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected consequences. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists. The first thing I noticed wasn't the unfamiliar ceiling or the expensive cologne still clinging to the pillows. It was the silence. That heavy, guilty silence that settles over you when you know you've crossed a line you can never uncross. I turned my head slowly and there he was. Marcus. His dark hair messy against the white pillowcase, his face peaceful in sleep, completely unaware that in exactly 11 hours and 18 minutes, he was supposed to be standing at an altar promising to love, honor, and cherish someone else. Someone who wasn't me. The silk sheets felt like a trap against my skin as I sat up, my mind racing to piece together how I'd ended up here. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed an accusatory 7:42 a.m., and with each passing second, the weight of what I'd done pressed heavier on my chest. You're probably wondering how I got here. Lying in the bed of a man who destroyed my life 8 months ago. My name is Elena, and Marcus wasn't just any man. He was my everything for 3 years. 3 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, and promises that turned out to be as fragile as tissue paper in the rain. I discovered his betrayal on a Tuesday. Isn't it funny how the worst days of your life always seem to happen on the most ordinary days? I'd gone to surprise him at his office with lunch, key in hand, smile on my face, completely unprepared for what I'd find. There he was in his leather chair, with Sophia straddling his lap, her fingers tangled in his hair the same way mine used to be. Sophia, my best friend since freshman year of college. The woman who'd held my hair back when I was sick, who'd been my maid of honor at my sister's wedding, who'd helped me pick out the lingerie I'd planned to surprise Marcus with for our anniversary. She looked at me over his shoulder with eyes that held no shame, no regret, just a cold satisfaction that chilled me to the bone. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of therapy, of crying into wine glasses, of rebuilding myself from the ground up. I thought I was healing. I thought I was moving on. Then 3 weeks ago, the wedding invitation arrived. It wasn't just any invitation. It was cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, the kind that screams expensive taste and perfect lives. But it wasn't the elegant font or the lakeside venue that made my hands shake as I held it. It was the note tucked inside, written in Sophia's perfectly practiced handwriting. I thought you should know how happy we are. Hope you can celebrate with us. The cruelty of it took my breath away. She wanted me to watch. She wanted me to sit in those uncomfortable church pews and witness their happily ever after while my own heart was still healing from the wreckage they'd left behind. That's when the plan started forming. Not immediately, I'm not a monster. But as the days passed and the invitation sat on my kitchen counter like a daily reminder of my humiliation, something dark and determined began growing inside me. If Sophia wanted me to witness their perfect love story, I'd give her a front row seat to its destruction. I spent weeks preparing. I researched the venue, learned the timeline, even found out which hotel the wedding party was staying at. I planned every detail with the precision of a military operation, because this wasn't just about getting even, this was about reclaiming my power from the 2 people who'd stolen it from me. The plan was simple, really. Show up at the rehearsal dinner, remind Marcus of what he'd lost, and seduce him on the night before his wedding. I wanted Sophia to feel the same betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. I wanted her to know that even on the eve of her supposed triumph, she couldn't truly have him. But as I lay there in his bed, surrounded by evidence of my successful revenge, I realized something that made my stomach turn. Success had never felt so much like failure. The Grand Lake Country Club looked like something out of a fairy tale when I arrived at 6:30 the previous evening. White lights were strung between ancient oak trees, and the terrace overlooked a lake that reflected the setting sun like scattered diamonds. It was the kind of venue that whispered of old money and perfect marriages, the kind of place where love stories were supposed to have happy endings. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A red dress that Marcus had once told me made me look like a goddess. It hugged every curve, fell just short enough to be memorable, and matched the lipstick I knew he could never resist. My hair was styled in loose waves, the way he used to love to run his fingers through it, and I'd worn the perfume that used to drive him crazy during our late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. Walking into that reception felt like entering enemy territory. Conversations seemed to pause as I passed, and I could feel the whispers following in my wake. But I held my head high, channeling every ounce of confidence I'd rebuilt over the past 8 months. Then I saw them. Marcus stood near the bar in his perfectly tailored navy suit, looking every inch the successful businessman he'd always aspired to be. And beside him, radiant in a flowing cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was Sophia. Her engagement ring caught the light as she gestured animatedly to a group of friends, and for a moment I almost lost my nerve. But then Marcus saw me, and the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips, and I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Sophia followed his gaze, and when her eyes met mine, her perfect smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place like a mask. She approached me first, arms extended as if we were still the best friends we'd once been. "Elena," she said, her voice honey-sweet with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "What a wonderful surprise. I wasn't sure you'd be able to make it." The lie rolled off her tongue so easily. We both knew she'd expected me to come. She'd practically dared me to with that note. This was all part of her game, her final victory lap. She wanted to parade her happiness in front of me, to prove that she'd won completely and utterly. But I'd come to play a different game entirely. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, matching her fake warmth with my own. "You look beautiful, Sophia. Marriage certainly agrees with you." She preened at the compliment, missing the subtle irony entirely. Marcus hung back, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between us like he was watching a tennis match where he couldn't predict the next serve. The evening unfolded exactly as I'd planned. I worked the room like the socialite I'd learned to be during my years with Marcus, charming his family members who remembered me fondly, reconnecting with mutual friends who seemed genuinely happy to see me. I was gracious, elegant, and just mysterious enough to keep people. I noticed how his laughter seemed forced, how he kept glancing in my direction when he thought no one was looking, how he'd grown quiet whenever someone mentioned how beautiful his bride looked. Sophia was busy being the perfect hostess, flitting from group to group like a butterfly, completely absorbed in being the center of attention. She was in her element, basking in the congratulations and well wishes, already mentally planning her Instagram posts about the perfect rehearsal dinner. That's when I made my move. I found Marcus alone on the terrace, staring out at the lake with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd always been a wine drinker. The whiskey told me everything I needed to know about his state of mind. "Having second thoughts?" I asked, stepping up beside him at the railing. The evening air was cool against my skin, and I let myself shiver just slightly, knowing he'd notice. He didn't look at me right away. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "Celebrating," I said simply. "Isn't that what you're supposed to do at these things?" He turned to face me then, And I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't expected, pain. Real raw pain that mirrored my own from 8 months ago. This is complicated enough without you being here. Complicated. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean marrying my best friend after cheating on me with her is complicated? I never would have guessed. He flinched like I'd slapped him. You know it wasn't supposed to happen like that. Things just evolved. Evolved. I tasted the word like bitter medicine. Is that what we're calling it now? We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of our history hanging between us like a fog. In the distance, I could hear laughter and music from the party, the sounds of people celebrating love while we stood surrounded by the wreckage of what we'd once had. I think about you, he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of waves against the dock. More than I should. And there it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Seeing him vulnerable, seeing that flicker of the man I'd once loved desperately, brought back feelings I thought I'd buried for good. Do you remember our first date? I asked, moving closer to him. You took me to that little Italian place downtown, and you were so nervous you knocked over your wine glass. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. You pretended not to notice. Just kept talking like nothing had happened while the waiter cleaned up the mess. I noticed, I said softly. I noticed everything about you. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. Elena, do you love her? The question escaped before I could stop it. Really love her? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I made the biggest mistake of my life losing you. That's when I knew I had him. But as his words washed over me, I realized with a shock that my heart was racing not from triumph, but from something far more dangerous, hope. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of stolen glances and carefully orchestrated encounters. I watched him drink more than he should, saw how his eyes kept finding mine across the crowded room. Sophia was too busy with wedding coordinator emergencies and bridesmaid drama to notice how distracted her groom had become. By 10 o'clock, Marcus was at my side again, this time with liquid courage flowing through his veins and years of regret loosening his tongue. Come with me, he said, his hand finding mine. Please. I should have said no. I should have walked away right then, claimed my moral victory, but the feel of his fingers intertwined with mine, the desperate look in his eyes, the way he said please like it was the most important word in the English language. It all combined to break down the walls I'd spent 8 months building. What about Sophia? I asked, even as I let him lead me toward the exit. She won't even notice we're gone, he said, and the sad truth of that statement hung between us like a confession. The drive to his apartment was silent except for the soft hum of his BMW's engine, and the weight of everything we weren't saying. I kept telling myself this was still part of the plan, that I was still in control, but the truth was that control had abandoned me the moment he'd said my name on that terrace. His apartment hadn't changed much in 8 months. Same leather furniture, same abstract art on the walls, same bottle of my favorite wine still sitting unopened in his kitchen. But something felt different, sterile, maybe like a museum exhibit of the life we'd once shared rather than a home where love had lived. I kept thinking you'd come back, he said as we stood in his living room, the city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Every day for months, I thought maybe today would be the day you'd forgive me. I did come back, I said, gesturing around us. I'm here now. What happened next was inevitable, like gravity or heartbreak or any other force of nature that can't be stopped once it's set in motion. He reached for me and I let him. His hands found my face, his thumbs tracing the cheekbones he'd once memorized in the dark. And when his lips met mine, 8 months of anger and longing and unfinished business crashed together like opposing storms. We moved to his bedroom like sleepwalkers, shedding clothes and inhibitions and the pretense that this was anything other than two broken people trying to find their way back to something that had been beautiful before it became wreckage. His hands remembered every inch of my skin, and mine remembered the way he shivered when I touched that spot just below his collarbone. We made love with the desperation of people who knew this was goodbye as much as hello, pouring 8 months of unsaid words into every kiss, every touch, every whispered endearment. Afterward, we lay tangled in his silk sheets, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. He stroked my hair the way he used to when we'd talk until dawn about everything and nothing. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I never stopped loving you." And God help me, I whispered it back. Because in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of our past and the impossibility of our future, it was still true. Despite everything he'd done, despite the wedding tomorrow, my red dress lay crumpled beside his discarded shirt, and looking at it made my stomach turn with a mixture of shame and something that felt dangerously close to regret. That's when I saw his phone on the nightstand, buzzing insistently like an angry wasp. The screen lit up with each call, and I couldn't help but see the name flashing over and over. Sophia. 47 missed calls. 47 attempts to reach the man who was supposed to marry her today. The man who had spent the night in bed with me instead. My hands shook as I pulled the sheet around myself, suddenly feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with being naked. What had started as a plan for revenge had become something else entirely, something messy and complicated and real. The taste of his kisses was still on my lips, the scent of his cologne still clinging to my skin, and the memory of his whispered, "I love you," was playing on repeat in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. The bathroom door opened and Marcus emerged wrapped in a towel, his hair still damp from the shower. But the man who stepped into the bedroom wasn't the same one who had held me through the night. This Marcus was pale, frantic, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "Elena," he said, my name sounding like a prayer and a curse all at once. "We need to talk." I pulled the sheet tighter around myself, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. "Good morning to you too." He ran his hands through his wet hair, a gesture I remembered from our years together. He always did that when he was stressed, when the weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him like a physical thing. This can't happen again. Last night it was a mistake. The word hit me like a physical blow. A mistake. 3 years of love, 8 months of heartbreak, and 1 night of passion reduced to a single devastating word. A mistake, I repeated, my voice eerily calm. Is that what you told yourself about Sophia too? That cheating on me was just a mistake? His face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, flawed, human. Elena, please. You have to understand. I'm getting married today. Sophia she's waiting for me. Her family, my family, everyone is expecting. Expecting what? I stood up, wrapping the sheet around me like armor. Expecting you to go through with a marriage to a woman you don't love? Expecting you to build a life on the foundation of lies and betrayal? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I shot back, anger finally breaking through the shock and hurt. You told me you loved me last night. You said losing me was the biggest mistake of your life. Was that a lie too? He couldn't meet my eyes. I do love you. But love isn't always enough. There are contracts, expectations, business arrangements. Business arrangements? The words tasted like poison in my mouth. You're talking about marriage like it's a corporate merger. In a way it is, he said quietly, and the honest brutality of that admission cut deeper than any lie could have. That's when I understood. This had never been about love, not really. It was about image, about maintaining the perfect life he'd constructed, about never having to face the consequences of his choices. I was the chaos he couldn't afford, the complication that didn't fit into his carefully ordered world. Sophia was safe, predictable, the kind of woman who looked good at business dinners and charity galas. You used me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Just like you used her. Just like you've probably used every woman who's ever been foolish enough to fall for your lies. That's not. Get out, I said, cutting him off. Get out so I can get dressed and pretend this never happened. He stared at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw regret flicker across his features. But then his phone rang again, Sophia's ringtone, the one he'd never bothered to change, and the moment was broken. Elena, I need you to promise me something, he said as he moved toward the door. Promise me you won't tell her. She doesn't deserve to have her wedding day ruined because of my mistakes. The audacity of it took my breath away. He was asking me to protect the woman who had stolen him from me, to ensure her happiness at the expense of my own integrity. He wanted me to be complicit in my own betrayal. Your mistakes. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what I am to you? Just another mistake to be covered up and forgotten. But he was already gone, the bedroom door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded as final as a coffin lid. I was alone with the evidence of our night together, and the crushing weight of what I'd discovered about the man I'd thought I'd known. I moved mechanically, gathering my clothes, trying to piece together not just my outfit but my shattered sense of self. In the space of 12 hours, I'd gone from vengeful ex-girlfriend to willing participant in my own humiliation. The red dress that had made me feel powerful the night before now seemed tawdry, desperate, a costume for a role I never should have played. But as I reached for my purse, something caught my eye. Marcus's phone, abandoned on the nightstand in his rush to escape the uncomfortable conversation. The screen was still lit up with notifications, and despite every instinct telling me to leave it alone, I found myself reaching for it. What I found there changed everything. Text after text from women whose names I didn't recognize. Photos I couldn't unsee. Conversations that painted a picture of a man I'd never truly known. A man who collected women like trophies and discarded them just as easily. I wasn't special. I wasn't the great love he'd let slip away. I was just another conquest, another name in a long list of women he'd used and abandoned. But the worst part wasn't discovering his other affairs. The worst part was realizing that Sophia didn't know. She was about to marry a man who had been systematically betraying her from the moment they'd gotten together, and she had no idea what kind of life she was signing up for. I sat on the edge of his bed, his phone heavy in my hands, faced with a choice that would define not just his future, but mine as well. I had the power to destroy their wedding, to expose him for the serial cheater he truly was. I could send screenshots to Sophia, could show up at the church with evidence of his betrayal, could burn his perfect life to the ground the way he'd burned mine. But as I sat there surrounded by the wreckage of my own poor choices, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't want to be the kind of person who destroyed other people's happiness, even if they destroyed mine first. I didn't want to let Marcus turn me into something cruel and vindictive. I'd already compromised my values by sleeping with him. I wouldn't compound the mistake by becoming someone I couldn't live with. But that didn't mean I was going to do nothing. I got dressed slowly, carefully, like I was preparing for something important. As I was preparing to do the right thing, even if it meant facing the most difficult conversation of my life. I was going to find Sophia, And I was going to tell her the truth. Not to hurt her, not to get revenge, but because she deserved to know what kind of man she was about to pledge her life to. She deserved the chance to make an informed choice about her future, even if that choice meant going through with the wedding anyway. As I walked toward the door of Marcus's apartment for what I knew would be the last time, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked different somehow, older maybe, or just tired. The woman staring back at me had learned something important in the past 12 hours. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it couldn't heal the wounds that had driven me to seek it in the first place. Only I could do that. The drive to the Grandview Hotel where the bridal party was staying felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, and I kept rehearsing what I was going to say to Sophia. How do you tell someone that their perfect wedding day is built on a foundation of lies? How do you destroy someone's happiness in the name of honesty? But I knew I had to do it. She deserved the truth, even if it came from the last person she wanted to hear it from. The hotel was buzzing with wedding day energy when I arrived. Vendors rushed past with flowers and equipment, and I could hear laughter and excitement echoing from the bridal suite upstairs. For a moment I almost lost my nerve. These people were preparing for what should be the happiest day of their lives, and I was about to walk into the middle of it like a tornado, leaving destruction in my wake. But then I remembered the texts on Marcus's phone, the casual cruelty of his betrayals, the way he'd looked at me that morning like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person he'd claimed to love. Sophia might hate me for what I was about to tell her, but at least she'd know the truth about the man she was planning to marry. I found her room number from the concierge and rode the elevator up in silence, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The hallway was decorated with "Congratulations Marcus and Sophia" banners, and seeing their names together made my stomach clench with a mixture of guilt and determination. I raised my hand to knock on the door of the bridal suite, but before I could make contact, I heard something that stopped me cold. Sobbing. Deep, heartbroken sobbing coming from inside the room. My hand froze inches from the door. Maybe she already knew. Maybe Marcus had grown a conscience in the 2 hours since I'd left his apartment and confessed everything to his bride. Maybe I was too late. But then I heard voices, multiple voices, and realized this wasn't the sound of a woman learning about her fiancé's betrayal. This was something else entirely. "Sophia, honey, you need to calm down," came a voice I recognized as her mother's. "The wedding is in 6 hours. We can't have you falling apart now. You don't understand." Sophia's voice was thick with tears and something else. Rage, maybe, or bitter disappointment. "It's all ruined. Everything is ruined." I pressed my ear to the door, shame burning in my chest for eavesdropping but unable to walk away. Whatever was happening in that room, it wasn't what I'd expected. "The investigator was very thorough," Sophia continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Every affair, every lie, every hotel room. I have documentation going back 2 years. 2 years of him cheating on me, and I've known about all of it." My blood ran cold. She knew. She'd known. And she was still planning to go through with the wedding. But why? "Are you sure this is the right way to handle this?" asked another voice, her sister maybe. "You could just call it off. No one would blame you." Sophia laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and bitter and full of something that made my skin crawl. "Call it off? Do you have any idea how much this wedding cost? How many people are here? How much I've invested in this relationship? But honey, if he's been unfaithful, he has repeatedly. With my best friend, with random women he meets at bars, with his secretary, probably with half the city by now." Her voice was steady now, cold and calculating. "But here's the thing. I've been documenting everything. Every affair, every lie, every breach of the prenup he insisted on. The prenup. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach as the pieces started falling into place. The adultery clause, Sophia continued, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice now. Any infidelity on his part voids the prenup completely. I get half of everything, his business, his properties, his investments. And thanks to my very thorough private investigator, I have enough evidence to bury him in court. So you're going through with the wedding just to divorce him? Her sister sounded shocked. I'm going through with the wedding because it's the only way to trigger the clause. We have to be legally married for the adultery provisions to take effect. One day of marriage, and I walk away with enough money to never have to work again. The room fell silent except for the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't the heartbroken bride I'd expected to find. This was something else entirely, calculated, ruthless, and absolutely terrifying. What about love? Her mother asked quietly. What about the life you thought you were going to have with him? Sophia's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Love? Mother, I stopped loving Marcus the first time he cheated on me. Everything since then has been an investment strategy. I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. All this time, I thought I was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, but Sophia had been playing an entirely different game. She'd known about Marcus's affairs, including mine, and she'd used that knowledge to set a trap that would destroy him completely. I thought about the wedding invitation, about the cruel note she'd included. She hadn't sent it to hurt me. She'd sent it because she'd wanted me to come. She'd wanted me to be part of Marcus's downfall, another piece of evidence in her carefully constructed case against him. The elevator ride down felt surreal, like I was floating outside my own body. I'd come here to tell Sophia the truth about her fiancé, only to discover that she'd known the truth all along and was using it as a weapon. Part of me felt vindicated. Marcus was going to get exactly what he deserved: public humiliation, financial ruin, the destruction of the carefully constructed life he'd built on lies and betrayal. But another part of me felt sick. There was something deeply disturbing about Sophia's cold calculation, about the way she turned marriage into a business transaction designed for maximum damage. And then there was the most unsettling realization of all. I'd been used. Not just by Marcus but by Sophia too. My presence at the rehearsal dinner, my night with Marcus, even my plan for revenge, it had all played perfectly into her larger scheme. She'd known I would come, known I would try to seduce him, known that I would give her one more piece of evidence to use against him. I drove home in a daze, trying to process everything I'd learned. The wedding would go on as planned. Sophia would walk down the aisle in her designer dress, looking like the picture of happiness while plotting her new husband's destruction. Marcus would stand at the altar, thinking he'd gotten away with his betrayals, completely unaware that he was signing his own death warrant. And where did that leave me? I was still the other woman. I was still the one who'd compromised her values for a night of revenge that had turned into something else entirely. I was still the one who'd let herself believe, for just a few hours, that love might be enough to fix what had been broken. But I was also free. For the first time in 8 months, I wasn't angry. I wasn't plotting revenge or fantasizing about Marcus's downfall, or wondering what my life would have been like if he'd never cheated. I was just done. Marcus was going to face consequences for his actions, consequences that were far worse than anything I could have devised. Sophia was going to get her revenge, cold and calculated and devastating. And I was going to do something I'd never considered before. I was going to walk away from all of it. 6 months later, I was living in a different city, working at a job I actually loved, dating a man who called when he said he would and meant it when he said he loved me. I'd learned something important from my night with Marcus. Seeking revenge doesn't heal the wounds that drive us to it. It just creates new wounds, deeper and more infected than the original ones. I never found out exactly what happened to Marcus and Sophia. I didn't want to know. But through mutual friends I heard whispers, something about a very short marriage, a very public divorce, and a very thorough division of assets that left Marcus working at a gas station on the outskirts of town. Karma, it turned out, didn't need my help. It was perfectly capable of handling things on its own. The truth is, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so good, so full, so genuinely happy that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. It's choosing to heal instead of choosing to hurt. It's walking away from toxic people and toxic situations and never looking back. I woke up in his bed on the morning of his rehearsal dinner thinking I was getting my revenge. But the real victory came later, when I realized I didn't need revenge at all. I just needed to forgive myself for loving someone who wasn't worthy of it, and then move on to something better. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to play the game. The truth is, karma doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes the best revenge is building a better life without the people who hurt you. What would you have done in Elena's situation? Let me know in the comments below. If this story taught you something about forgiveness, revenge, or moving on, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will make you think.